Welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. Bonsai Stuff, the podcast for bonsai nut bags by a bonsai nut bag. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening as always. And we are well and truly neck deep in repotting season where I am. And if you haven't started repotting, then really you've got to get onto it. The trees are all starting to wake up. I noticed that a big batch of the trees that I've had sheltered in my workshop for a long period, about 3 weeks, then they've been outside under sheltered areas as well, under a deck, very protected from any frost and exposure to sunlight, wind and all that sort of stuff. And they've been there for a week and a half. And they've, or maybe just a bit over that actually, nearly just under 2 weeks. So that's about 5 weeks of care for them before I moved them today up into a sheltered area back up in my on my benches, my display benches, where there's a lot of shelter above for them. But a lot of the trees had pop buds and they were all starting to open up leaves, so it's all happening. My next biggest fear isn't frost coming. It's the possums that decide to see that lovely fresh foliage and think it would make a nice little snack. So I've had to strategically position them on benches where the possums hopefully can't reach. I said hopefully because they pretty much go wherever the hell they want. Anyway, the podcast today, what I'm going to be talking about is with part of the process or part of my structure, my internal structure that I use when I have repotted. It's the repot process, it's the protection process, and then just before they go back out, I give everything, all the deciduous, a nice prune. A good structural look at, nice up and close and personal with them before the foliage comes out. They're woken up, so the cuts can be made and they'll be healing nicely. They won't continue to remain dormant. They're waking up. So I find that doing a prune now before the buds take off and the tree starts wasting resources on every single bud on the tree, where it's appropriate, I'll go through and I'll cut and give them a big haircut. So I've been doing that for the last couple of days. It's really important work for me because I love the structure on my deciduous trees in winter. I really do. I work so hard for it. And what I want to talk about is hitting the reset button. So I have a trident maple in mind that I'm going to go and tell a story on, where it was very full, but it was ugly. When you looked at the structure of the tree, like in summer, it looked lovely, looked great, looked really, really nice, like full, looks like it's got a lovely silhouette, everything going for it. And it's a medium-sized tree, so it's significant in size, it's not tiny. But the structural flaws of the branching was just too much. So I want to go and talk about that. I want to also talk about planning and expectations. I did some work on making a semi-cascade juniper the other day. So I want to talk a little bit about that one. And I want to talk about large root removal considerations that you should make and some tips and tricks that should make it easier for you when you're repotting. So let's get into it. Right, let's start episode 30 for season 6, year 6 of the podcast. Let's start it by talking about hitting this reset button. And this is very recent, very, very recent that I did this, where this trident maple had grown. And it hadn't been, I don't hedge prune my plants, but one downside to hedge pruning, which is exactly what it sounds like, is just pruning to a silhouette rather than looking at the structure of the tree. You'll end up with very thick, coarse, lumpy branch structure at the tips. And it generally means that your branches are long, leggy, they get to the end and then they sort of shoot out in all directions and they get very thick and coarse. And because there's so much happening in that one particular spot when you hedge prune them, you end up with a really thick lump on the end as well. So, it looks great when if you are a hedge or, when you're looking at something in full summer silhouette, it looks really, really nice. But when you look at them when they're naked, when they've just got their structure to show you, they can be very ugly, really, really ugly. And this tree, well, like I said, while it hadn't been hedge pruned, it definitely had the feel to me like the branches have got quite long, the branches have got quite thick, especially in the higher areas of the tree where I want light, delicate growth. And this trident maple is, the type of foliage that it has is rather coarse and rather heavy and unruly anyway. So it's never going to be a tiny, light, delicate little tree with really fine growth. I accept that. I'm not looking for that. I don't want this tree to be something that it's not. I want it to be what it is. And so by looking at this structure, I could see that there was some major issues there. And the easy thing to do would go, look, I'll sort that out later. Or I'll put it back on the bench, I'll let it start growing, then I'll sort it out. But today I went, you know what, I've looked at this tree probably for the last 2 years, being completely honest with myself and with you. I've looked at it for the last 2 years and gone, I'm just not happy with it. Like, it's nice, but I think that's part of the downside to having a lot of trees is that you definitely, and favourites isn't the right word, but you definitely get high quality trees that perform really well, that you've done the hard work on, that come to the fore, that shine, that are just magnificent, that, you know, sort of they cast a shadow on anything that's not quite as good. So it's very easy to get something that's not quite as good and go, well, you know what, I don't really need this to be a showpiece, so it's okay. I'll just put it back on the bench and I'll leave it and I'll come back to it another time. You know, when I've got time, you know, when I retire, when I win Tats Lotto and I can not worry about working, you know, then I can work on this tree and I can come back to it. But, you know, recently that was the day. That was the day when I just went, I've had enough. I don't want to put this back on the bench. You know, I'm actually sick of it. I want it to become the tree that it probably can. You know, it's got a beautiful nabari, it's got a beautiful trunk, it's got lovely leaf qualities, it's got, you know, beautiful spring colour, it's got magnificent autumn colour, it grows really well, it's strong, it's healthy, it ticks so many boxes for me to be a magnificent bonsai. It's in a really nice pot, you know, it's got everything going for it. It responds well. When I take it out and I repot it and I look at the roots, I think, why can't all my trees be as good as this one? So there's a lot going for it, regardless of the structure that's been allowed to be left and get progressively worse over time. So anyway, what started with scissors ended with a saw and branch cutters. So I went through and I was lightening the tips and I went, that's not enough. Go back a bit further. You prune it all back and you look at it and go, yeah, okay, so step back 2 meters, have a look. No, that's so thick and coarse. Like, that's a joke. Like, if I had someone come into my workshop with this tree and say, hey, look, what do you think? First thing I'd do would be say, okay, let's go back and talk about structure on your bonsai. Good structure is good bonsai. You can't get around it. So I said to myself, you know, don't let the opportunity slip past. Take it, seize it, you know, get the branch cutter, get the saw out. Let's start removing some of this back. So anyway, what was, I don't know, I hate to think how long it was. It's over 10 years of structural development on this tree. Got taken back to stumps because there was really, when I looked at it critically, I needed to hit the reset button. I needed to go back to square one with this tree and go, well, you know, let's you know, stages of development, trunk and nabari, got it. Primary branches, yeah, okay, so if I cut these back and I get all this, I force back budding on this area, then I can start building my secondary branches, because that's where this tree really the tree didn't let me down. The tree did what it does normally, where I let the tree down by not focusing my effort on the secondary branching. I focused more on the ramification without getting the third stage of, according to me, of development of your trees. So trunk and nabari, yes. Primary branches, yes. Secondary branching, no. Tertiary ramification, yes. So it's like, well, you've sort of jumped stage 3. So then to go back and hit the reset button, you've got to basically cut everything off to a point where you can say, okay, now I've got to start again. And it's okay. Yeah, I developed my plan for this tree there and then on the spot. Cut off everything. There was crap everywhere. I took cuttings for some of it. I don't know why, but I took some cuttings of the upper part, the apex, which is really nice and fine and developed. And it, you know, they could be really nice trees if they take, but that's a whole nother podcast. But I went back to stage 1 and went, okay, so now what's going to be my target? What am I going to do with this? So I'm going to do a bit of an elongation grow, let everything push out, 4, 5, 6 leaves, something like that. Sets of nodes on this thing, let it push out, and then come in and start doing some selective cutting. Cut around the apex, let the lower areas continue to grow out so my secondary branching can be a bit more significant, but keep it nice and light around the top of the tree, which is where it's pushing all its juice, and it's going to get really thick really fast, which is exactly the problem that I had to cut off. So I've just had to hit a reset, so... And I was thinking to myself, I got out my notebook and I went, well, how am I going to talk about this? What's the thought that's running through my head when I looked at this tree and I went, no more. Put your foot down, take a stand, and fix this thing. Don't let it slip into mediocrity. The overall objective for me is make the best bonsai in the world, according to me. Am I doing this tree justice by just simply sliding it back on the bench? There's no way I am. No way in hell. So the thoughts that went through my head when I thought about this tree, I went, how would I describe this? How would I tell everyone that listens to the podcast, the bonsai stuff, how would I tell them what I was feeling at that time? And I went, it's full but ugly. And it's so true. Full of ramification, full of branching, full of structure. But when I come back and I look at the technical side of that structure and how well it's structured, it was ugly as sin. Absolutely ugly as sin. And that's nothing on the tree. That's on the custodian. That's on me. That's on me not doing my end of the bargain. The tree said, you feed me, you water me, you look after me, I'll grow really strong and I'll do exactly what I should do as a tree. You just have to prune me. You just have to make me look beautiful and make sure that I shine. Did I do that? No, I didn't. So hitting the reset button for me while I was a bit, it's hard because you look at all those years, those wasted years that I've been through. And at the start, I was like, oh, God, this is such a waste. I'm so angry. Like I was frustrated. It was just disappointing. And then I went to the point, you know what? This is actually a real opportunity. You've developed the tree so well with its trunk and the bari. It's so attractive. And the things that have made me skip past it and not spend as much time on it as what I should in the past, I've been able to just remove. And it's like, it was liberating. It was like someone lifted a weight off my shoulder and went, well, now you don't have to look at that anymore and go, geez, that's thick and it's getting thicker and it's looking worse, but that's okay. Just prune it and move on because there's a lot of other trees you need to get round to. By cutting it all off, it's like, okay, cool, let's see where this tree can go. Let's make it perfect. Let's go from this full but ugly version of a maple to something that's magnificent, that's got perfect secondary branching. Get that right. I'm not even going to think about ramification on this thing until I know that I can tick that box and say, yep, okay, I've done trunk and the bari, I've done primary branches. When I can go, secondary branches are absolutely spot on, and I'm going to keep working. I've made a commitment to the tree and to myself that I'm going to keep working on this thing until I get it absolutely cherry ripe, get it perfect, and get that secondary branching just right, and then start the ramification process on it and see where it goes. Man, who knows? It, may well be the best bonsai in the world, according to me. So anyway, hit that reset button if it's full but ugly. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I really do love the subscribers to this podcast. It means a lot to the continuity of it, and it means a lot to me to know that I've got the support of a range of people out there that really believe in what this podcast is about. So thank you very much. And if you aren't a subscriber but you're thinking about it, you can jump on board for as little as $3 a month. And like I said, it really does go a long way to supporting the continuity of this podcast for everybody. So please consider, and if you'd like to, and if you've got the means to, then jump on board and become a bonsai lover like the rest of us. Right, so another little story. Story time with Uncle Scott. Another little story. I had someone come into the workshop the other day, and they prepared me for it, doing a one-on-one with this juniper that they just weren't happy with. And she said, I just don't like it as it is. It's a sort of informal upright slanting style. Give you some specs on it, maybe 60 centimeters from toes to head sort of thing. It was okay. It was nice. It had nice branches. It had nice pads. It had nice apex. It was just nice. There's nothing special about it. Wasn't great, but it was just not good enough. And so I went, okay, cool. And she said to me, "What do you see? What do you think?" And I went, "Well, really, you've got some thickening. There's no taper. It's pretty bland. It's like a sausage all the way up the tree. I think we could do something a bit different with it. We could change it." And she went, "Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking of changing it completely to a cascade or a semi-cascade from this informal upright." I went, "Right, okay. So that would mean that in this sort of an area of the tree, we would have to look at doing some kind of a bend. Because if we just tilt this thing over and it's a straight pole, it's going straight up with very little movement in it anyway, and no taper, just by turning this thing on its side doesn't make it a cascade. So we sort of want to go up out of the pot and then come down. So with the angle change, I was like, all right, cool. We can do that easy. The Nabari spread the way it is, it's it's sort of leaning to one side already, so it's just maybe increasing the angle of the in the repot, sort of going from between 45 to 90 degrees down to say 30 degrees on the trunk, or 30 to 45 degrees, somewhere in that sort of vicinity, and then picking a point somewhere along there and doing a bend, a major bend, and starting to get the cascading tail down. I said, but we still don't fix core issues with regard to taper. We stay very thick, we stay very long, we stay very, boring. It's not going to hit your target of what's in your head. We need to talk about what's in your head and what you'd like, and then look at what we can do with the material that's presented in front of us. So this part of the podcast is talking about planning and expectations being keys to success when it comes to significant procedures. Often you'll see demos or you jump on YouTube and someone will do something. Now, I can't talk for anyone else but myself, as we never should, but I can tell you that for me, the vast majority of time, probably 99% of the time that I've done something, I've planned it in the background, and it could be for weeks, it could be for hours, it could be for days, it could be whatever time it is. But it's always I sit down and I plan things and I sketch things out, and I think, okay, so if I did this here, then I would do that, and how would I do that? Like, it's easy to say, take a informal upright slanting juniper that's the same thickness, and it's quite thick. Like, it was, the trunk at its base would have been, I'm just measuring it with my fingers now, probably 3 to 4 centimeters wide, sort of something like that. So it's it's hefty. You can't just sort of get this thing with a little bit of wire and just bend it and go, well, there you go, because you're a light little tree that's the thickness of a pencil. Bending 4 to 5 centimeters of trunk, no matter what it is, takes a lot of planning, and you need to get it right. You can't just sort of jam it together and put under the wheel of the car and drive over it and go, well, there it is, it's all done. So part of the planning process for me was to think, okay, so how do I get my bend point right there? How do I on the trunk, how do I come up, 25 centimeters from the base of this tree to get to that point right there and bend that part down? It's easy to say it, but it's so hard to do it. So part of the process was, I thought, okay, so what I need to do is I need to, one, bend something, but secondly, I need to hold something rigid. So from the Nabari, from the base of the tree up to the bend point, you have to hold that very still. And then I've got to get from that point on, I've got to be able to bend that point down. So it was like, okay, so part of the planning for it was steel bars, steel rail. I love my steel rail. For bending, major bending of any kind, steel rail is the way to go for me, because it works. It's easy to control, it's easy to get, it's cheap, it's affordable, and you can really pinpoint exactly where you want the bend to be. So it's always based around where the steel end is, where the bar stops. That's where the bend starts. So the part that I want to bend, secure a nice firm. Well, let's go back a step. Once you bend something, you've got to be able to hold it in place. So it's just a matter of going, bent. Okay, so let go of the bar and it bounces back like a spring, boing, back to where exactly it started. So it's a matter of not only planning to get the bend exactly where you want it, but it's like, okay, so once you bend it, big fella, how are you going to hold this thing in place? So it's like, okay, guy-wise. Okay, so how are you going to secure a guy-wire? You're going to screw something in. One of my favourite ways of holding guy wires together is putting wire around trunk or the branch or whatever it is, and then coming back to that wire itself and having the guy wire between your curls of wire as it moves its way along the trunk. So I was like, okay, step one, get in there and wire it. If you jump too far ahead with these things and you miss a step, you've got to basically undo all of your hard work, go back to the start, rework it all. So experience has told me like the procedures I need to do. So it's wire the entire trunk, get that thing fully done, position the holding steel bar in place so it's secured against the trunk and the wire there with padding so it doesn't gouge in, with some pretty heavy wires to say, okay, this part of the trunk isn't going to move. Then get my next steel bar, the longest one I had, so I could get some real leverage on the bend. Then I come back, position that on the extension of the trunk, the part that I want to bend, and then set up a little wooden wedge underneath the trunk itself to hold it in place to say, okay, so let's start pushing down on this steel bar and start bringing it down. I'd put also in between the curls of the wire my tie-in wire. So it was only 1.2 mil, I think it was, copper wire that I used for that guy wire. So I got to be able to bend this trunk down slowly, taking your time, feeling it, making sure the fibers are stretching, making sure you're not just crunching this thing as fast as you can, just really doing it over, I don't know, probably half an hour, 40 minutes, just slowly take up the slack on the guy wire, let it rest, get back on it again, push down a little bit more with the steel bar, take up the slack, let it rest, and just kept doing that until we got exactly where this trunk had this nice bend point, and I went, presto, I've got it exactly where I want this thing. So by putting the wire around the trunk as well, you also are going to force a little bit of scarring as that trunk starts to grow, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it helps hold everything together. That scarring holds the bend that you've just done on the trunk in place. Now, I didn't use raffia, I didn't use tape because I felt that the bend that we were doing wasn't drastic. Like, it's not folding this thing in on itself. It was gentle. It was, going from a straight line down to maybe another 30-degree sort of angle bend, maybe a touch more than that, but it was definitely not enough to do any significant damage or tearing of the bark layer at all. And that's one thing I really keep a close eye on, is as I'm bending, I'm looking at the pinch point, at the point where the damage is going to occur, because that's where the pressure is, because I've isolated that based on where I've got the tip of my steel bars, and that's the exact point where I'm going to do damage. So by keeping a really, really close eye on it, I don't have to worry about it. I could bend it down. And this is the second part, my expectation was that it was going to be okay. Like the experience and doing it in that controlled format and having stuffed it up a long, long time ago, to then learning the correct technique and doing it just right, my expectation was that it's going to be okay. And I'll be able to get that sort of semi-cascade look where it starts to go up and then it starts coming down. And then, to solve our taper issue that we had, we looked at the very end of it and we said, okay, well, this part, this branch here now that, is literally growing on the downside of this new trunk line that we've got. Let's wire that up, let's bring it round. And the big thick part that was the entire apex of the tree, where there's lots of, nothingness really, it was just all consistent thickness, we made a big gin. So this tree, dropped back in length, finished at about, 45 centimetres, was a bit more compressed. We got to repot this thing because it wasn't very stressful what we had done. Anyway, it was well overdue for a repot. Put into a semi-cascade pot, which is, like a squarish sort of pot with the same sort of depth as the width of the pot. And it looked magnificent. This tree, the before photo, I looked at it again after I'd finished the work with this person, and we were both like, really, you have those days at the office where you just pat yourself on the back and go, that's really cool. That's good. That tree now has taken on a completely different feel. And the owner of the tree, which is what made my day, turned around and said, I love it now. I love it. I've gone from tolerating this thing to absolutely love it. This is exactly what I wanted. And it's like, that is so rewarding. So there's a tree now in this lady's collection, which is, on a path now, a journey to becoming magnificent. There's still, obviously, changing the angle of this thing. There's still more work to do with building pads and improving the structure of the tree. But that planning side of major work and the expectation of what's going to happen, things can go wrong. Of course, they can go wrong, but knowing what to expect and having it fully planned out makes these things go so smoothly. So, within a couple hours, this tree had transformed from really just a very bland, average tree to something that looked really, really nice, really high end, and had a lot of beautiful features to it and a lot of movement and zero damage. That was the best part. Like we didn't do anything untoward to the tree, and it's responded really well. And there's another beautiful bonsai out there in the world. Repotting. Repotting, as you know, is one of my favourite things we can do with our trees. It is an excellent opportunity for us to improve a bonsai's strength and health and condition, and ensure that over the next X amount of time, 2 to 4 to 5 years, whatever it is that's going to be in that pot, that we can achieve the objectives with the tree to become or to take on the next stage of their bonsai journey. And it's so rewarding that you do it properly and you do it accurately, you do it to the best of your ability, and you ensure that you focus in on tree strength and health, and it works. Your journey is going to be better, the tree is going to be much better, everything's just going to work for you. All issues that you've had in the past will start to disappear as the tree gets stronger. You don't have to worry about pest and disease anywhere near as much. Backbudding starts to happen. What happens below happens above. So if you've got a really strong, fine, fibrous root system, then you've got a really strong, fine, delicate growing structure of the tree, give or take. But you know what I mean. So repotting for me is one of those things that you need to practice and you need to get right, and you need to not be scared of, because it's anything but scary for the tree. It's a rejuvenation process. One of the things that we come across when we repot is the large roots. And I wanted to talk about things that you need to consider when you're removing large roots. Now, just because it takes a lot of real estate in the pot, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have a significant impact when it's removed from the tree. You just need to check it out. You need to see what's happening. So I'll give you an example. So there's trees that I've repotted where I look at them and they might be first time repot, and I'll look at the tree and go, wow, that root, it comes off the trunk line there. That is significant. That's a big, hefty bloody root. And I'll look at it and go, but it's crossing and it's ugly and I really want to get rid of it, but it's so thick in comparison to all the other roots. It's probably one of the most dominant roots on that tree. So then what I'll do is, rather than just going, oh, well, it's too big, I have to leave it, I'll follow it. I'll follow the vessel. I'll look at where that root goes to and I'll go, what's connected to it? How much of the tree's root percentage is connected to this one large root? And I have found, not all the time, it's definitely not all the time, but for a fair swag of the time, there's not much attached to those large roots. Like I'll follow it around and I'll go, okay, well, all right, so there's a tuft of fine roots on the end of this thing, but it's really just a long vessel. It's taking up a lot of space in here and not doing much good for the tree. It's existing. Is it really making the tree a lot stronger? Overall, it's probably maybe 2% of the tree's root system. So why am I stressing about it? Cut it off, improve it. Good structure is good bonsai, and it applies to the root system as well. So you cut it off when it's like that, when it's not a significant portion of the feeder roots of the tree, then you're very safe to remove that large crossing root. Another thing that I'd suggest you do is look for root branching on those large roots. So what I mean by that is, when you're pruning a tree and you look and sometimes you try and ensure you've got foliage behind where you're going to make a cut, because it'll ensure that there's sap flow to that area, so the buds will activate and start to grow. When I'm repotting and I know there's a large root, and if I look back along that root, it might not be, I'm not talking like the thickness of your arm. It could just be that when you're brushing out all your fine roots, there might be one that's probably, 10 times thicker than those. So it might be, 4 or 5 millimeters across, something like that. It's not massive, but it's it's significant compared to the fine, delicate 1 millimeter roots, so it sort of stands out a little bit. And I think I've got to get rid of that. But, do I really need to go and just hack this thing off back at where it starts? And I say, no, I don't. What I want to look for is root branching. So I will look at where the root originates from, follow it down until I see little fine fibrous roots coming off that root, and I'll go just past that point and I'll make a cut, just like what I do with a branch. There's no difference. So if you take your time and you remove it back like that, it might be that next time you go to repot that thing, instead of being 5 millimeters, it could be 8-9 millimeters. It could have got thicker. It could have got far more significant in size, and it has to be removed. But by doing this partial removal, you're not taking away a significant amount of the tree's root system, especially if there's a hell of a lot of these things in the root ball. If there's only one, and it's only a minuscule percent of the tree's root system, just cut it off. Don't even think about it. But if you're looking at that root system and you go, well, you know what? They're pretty much all these thicker roots, and there's some fine roots, but they're all down the ends, and they're 30 centimeters away from the tree, and I really want to reduce this root ball back. Going into a more pumice-based mix, you'll find that you'll promote those finer roots in a lot closer to the trunk of the tree. So then you look for this root branching, and you'll just go through and cut them. And I find that that's often the case for me when I'm going from a plastic grow pot to a bonsai pot. It may have transitioned from a deeper pot to a shallower pot, and then from that shallower pot, there's still been some really aggressive root growth in there because of the sheer size of the pot. So then I've got to come in, I've got to find these medium thickness roots and just start looking for branching off the side of them, and then I'll come through and I'll start cutting them off and reducing them back. And then next time when they start getting into a bonsai pot, it's not really a consideration that I have to deal with every time. It might be the odd one here and there, and I'll chase them back and cut them off because there's a bucket load of fine roots in there anyway. If when you're doing that percentage impact statement, you're looking at saying, okay, so what impact is it going to have removing this root? And if you look at it and go 2% cut off, don't even think about it. No need to write up a formal request form to cut it off. All you do is just cut it off. But if you look at it and go, well, actually, it's pretty significant. Like it's a good chunk of roots. It's 10, 15% of roots. But if I get rid of it, it's going to improve that root structure of the tree. And it's going to make the nabari nicer. It's more often than not, it's crossing roots that do it for me that I try and get rid of. I try and get the nabari to flow nicely, depending on the tree, but more often than not, I'll try and get the nabari to flow nicely from the center out in a radial fashion. As if you look at any picture on anywhere and Google it, you'll find nice nabari on a bonsai. That's what you aim for, what I aim for. So if you are going to remove these larger roots, one of the considerations is what's the impact it's going to have on the tree? What's going to happen post-repotting? If I cut this thing off, if I make the bonsai one step better, if I improve the structure of this root system by removing that big root there, and I take out a fair chunk of roots, what's going to happen to the health of the tree? And a lot of it for me comes down to my aftercare process once I've repotted. So I wanted to just chat about that a little bit as well, because it's pretty important, this stuff. And there are plant shock treatments. There's all different ones. One of the ones that I use, sea salt, is great as a sort of tonic for the tree, but there's also something called plant starter we can get in Australia, and there are others. I've been sent messages. There's plenty of other stuff that I'm sure if you look up, plant shock treatment or transplanting shock treatment, something like that for your trees, you'll find them. And what you use is entirely up to you based on your experience and your environment and all that stuff. So I'm not pushing brands or anything like that here. I'm just telling you what I do. And this plant starter I really like because it's very mild. It seems to work really well. I've used it. I've got a really long history with it. It's nothing new. It's predictable. It's reliable. It's consistent. It's all the big buzzwords that I love to say about what I do with almost everything with my bonsai. So I will I'll know that by removing it, the tree is going to have a shock. It's going to be in shock, so I need to treat the shock. How do I do that? Protect it from the elements. Keep it in a really nice, cozy environment. Don't put the tree under stress by just throwing it back out on the bench into full sun and having it suffer as a result, because its root system's not going to be able to do what it should do until it's recovered from what you've done to it. So I try and make sure that I'm caring for it, not treating it, the symptoms of it 3 months down the track when I look at it and go, well, the tree's just dropped all its needles or every leaf's fallen off the tree, and I'm hoping to God that this thing backbuds and pushes out because there's nothing left on the tree because what I've done's been massive and I didn't care for it properly. So by doing this post-repotting care, which sounds like it's excessive, but I'll go through it again, 3 weeks in the workshop, out of the elements, out of everything, just protected till you catch your breath. After 3 weeks, there's bud movement, things are starting to happen. Go outside into another completely sheltered area. No sun, no wind. It's cooler temperatures, yep, definitely than what it is when it's inside. And everything sort of starts to grow a little bit, but really slowly. And the new buds that start to come out, I'm protecting them from the frost because they're so soft and delicate. And I'm mindful. I'm looking at it, waiting for the sphagnum moss to dry on top of the soil to let me know that tree's taking up water. Then I'll get some water, and I'll get a little bit more plant starter whenever it needs it, based on what the packet recommends you do. But I'm not just flooding water on these things. I'm not letting them go bone dry. It's like they're in a nursery and they're a fresh baby, and I'm taking care of them every step of the way. And then when I start to see them improve, and they're taking up a lot more water and a lot stronger, then they go up to another area of my yard, which is again sheltered, but it's far more exposed. It doesn't get the frost, but it gets the wind, it gets sunlight, in filtered forms, and it's just a third step in the transition for them to get back to their usual spot on the bench, which is a nice open area, which will happen too. So in another couple of weeks, I'll look at the trees, make sure I'm happy with everything, start moving out into the more exposed areas, because by then, fingers crossed, the cooler weather at night will start to bugger off and it'll start to get warmer and I won't have to worry about frost quite so much. But I'm very much about the protection and predicting what's going to happen with this thing when I cut it off. And also use the spring growth to promote root growth. So if I know that I've been onto a tree and I've been a bit heavy-handed to, taking that 1 to 2 steps back to take those extra steps forward somewhere down the track with this tree, then I'll also let the spring foliage start to grow and not stop it. I'll sacrifice a little bit of structure to improve the root system of the tree, because as the new spring growth takes off, so too does the root ball. The root ball will grow to support the foliage mass. So if I let the foliage grow more than what I need, and then I come in and cut that back, then I've got a bigger root system than what I would have had if I just pinched all this foliage as it started to grow or stopped it from elongating at that point. So by knowing that there's an impact for this thing and that I've got to play my cards a lot differently from what I normally would, means that I'm just prepared for what's going to happen. I'll also do wound management. If it's a significant cut, I'll put some cut putty on it. I don't really use cut paste under the soil because of the water, but I'll use some cut putty on it. If it's that significant, then I'll protect it from any rot, and I'll try and encourage wound management and all that sort of stuff to make sure that the new cambium starts to roll over and it's healed. And I just do the best I possibly can with everything I have in front of me. If it's a major chop and it's below the soil surface, then I might put putty on the top section of where the cut is, but the bottom section I'll put some root hormone around the cambium, and I'll put some sphagnum moss on there and protect it, and put a little bit of soil on top of that, and just try and encourage new roots to grow from that section as well to improve the nabari and just make the tree stronger. So there's a lot to removing the significant roots or large roots when you're repotting. The worst thing you can do, in my opinion, my 2 cents worth, is just leave it. If you just leave it, it's not going to get better. And you're going to have to make a decision when the tree possibly is relying more heavily on those larger roots. So it might be something that's done over a series of time. Like, I'm not saying do it all and go out there with your chainsaw and cut them all off in one hit. It might be something that you look at it and go, okay, I'm going to make an assessment. The whole root system of this tree is 3 or 4 of these large significant roots. What am I going to do to bring this thing back into control? It might be, okay, this year I'm going to take off this one. This one's the worst one. I'm going to cut that off and I'm going to try and encourage some new roots. I'm going to put it into a fine root encouraging mix that's going to really try and boost the tree's strength in its root system. I'm going to fertilize it really well, and I'm not going to worry about the structure of the tree. I'm going to worry about what I can use the structure to do to develop the tree's root system, which is allowing it to grow, then cutting it back once it's elongated, and then letting it grow again. So you're getting these massive pushes of this fresh growth of the new roots. Then maybe next year, maybe the year after, then you'll come in and look at do another assessment on the root ball. Has it worked? Has it not worked? If it has worked, great, let's do another one. And just make it one of these gradual things that over time you're going to end up with perfection. There's no rush, but you want to get there eventually, and doing nothing's definitely not going to help you get there. Well, just like that, folks, we're done. Another episode, another podcast done. I don't know actually how many podcasts I've done now. I should do a count, but there's a few up there. So I apologise if I send you to sleep. Maybe that's what you listen to me for. I'm like that white noise that you can listen to at night to take your mind off everything and allow you to have a good night's sleep. Anyway, thank you for listening in. I do truly appreciate it. A couple of new subscribers on board. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's awesome. I really, really appreciate it. Really provides a spring in my step. Hope you enjoyed this podcast too. It's timely, and there's a bit to this one because there's been some significant stuff that I've been doing lately that was warranting discussion on the podcast, and hopefully it's a bit thought provoking for you too, wherever you are around the globe. But the main thing is that bonsai should be pretty close to front of mind for you on a very consistent basis because they need us. They need us, and they need us to be focused. Like that trident, the maple that I did the reset button on, things can slip by pretty fast, and if you don't correct them on a regular basis, then it gets to the point where you have to do something pretty serious. It's the 5-year cutback, but this was more than that. This was the reset button. This is going back to square one, saying it's just not good enough, and if you want to achieve more, doesn't mean you have. Please, don't go to every tree in your collection and start lopping off every branch that you've got out there. That's definitely not what this was intended to do. This part of the podcast, if you're happy with them and you love them the way they are, then that's great. That's brilliant. But if you look at them and you know that there's some major flaws there that should be improved, just don't let time slip past. Make sure that you get in there. The sooner you start it, the sooner it's going to finish. And like I said, I'm actually really excited now for the progression of this one and just to see where I can take it and be a little bit smarter about things and develop a far superior bonsai that's going to be stronger and loved just a little bit more than what it was. Anyway, thanks for listening in as always. Please reach out if I can help with anything bonsai related, and let's keep this bonsai love flowing thick and fast all around the globe. Until next time, happy bonsai.